progress. Okay, I think we're ready.
Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting, our regular school board meeting, to order. The school board would like to take the moment to respectfully acknowledge we are residing on the traditional land of the Dene people. Our mission statement is to provide an excellent, equitable education in a safe, supportive environment so all students will succeed and contribute to a diverse and changing society. If you'll please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Ms. Richardson, could I have the roll call, please?
Mr. Dorn,
Here.
Mrs. Burnett,
Here.
Mrs. Hardy,
Here.
Mrs. Matheson,
Here.
Miss Marati,
Here.
Mrs. Smith.
Here.
Miss Smith is on Zoom. Colonel Siri is on Zoom.
Yes.
Colonel Alvarado is excused. Mrs. Sanderson,
Yes,
thank you. The board has a quorum.
thank you. Next on our agenda is the ESP of the month. Our core value is high expectation, maintain high expectations and education opportunities to inspire higher achievement. Public comment. Ms. Ida Elliott, North Pole Elementary School Administrative Secretary, will be recognized as the ESP of the month for November 2022. Mark Winford, North Pole Elementary School Principal, will make the presentation.
Good evening. North Pole Elementary Administrative Secretary Ida Elliott selflessly serves the community of North Pole Elementary. She is essential on the front lines and behind the scenes for the successful day-to-day operation of the school. She brings immense creativity and technical skill to her complex position, and she is very gifted in interacting with all members of the North Pole Elementary community, staff, students, and parents. Thank you, Ida, for your many contributions to the positive culture of North Pole Elementary.
Next, we do the adoption of the agenda. Core value is student-centered. Everything we do on the student and student learning. Consent agenda items marked with an asterisk are considered routine items not requiring public discussion by the school board. Unless removed from the consent agenda, asterisk items will be automatically approved when the agenda is adopted. Questions concerning these items should be directed to the administration before the meeting. If the superintendent or a member of the public wishes to have an item removed from the consent agenda, the request must be made to a board member anytime prior to the start of the meeting. The board member has the discretion to accept or deny the request. Only board members may remove an item from the consent agenda. If an item is removed from the consent agenda, it shall be considered separately as the last item of new business. Asterisk items will then be adopted by a single motion.
Move to adopt the agenda with consent items.
Second.
Could I have the vote?
Colonel Surrey,
Yes.
Mrs. Burnett,
Yes.
Mrs. Matheson,
Yes.
Mr. Doran,
Yes.
Mrs. Hardy,
Yes.
Miss Marati,
Yes.
Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Sanderson.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Oops. Presentation of the agenda items. Any person wishing to speak to an agenda action item will have 2 minutes to testify. What? Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Meline, would you please read our consent agenda?
Yes. The board is accepting the award in the amount of $65,060 for the Alaska Trauma Recovery in Schools Trauma Recovery Demonstration Grant Program from the United States Department of Education through the Alaska Department of Education and Early Development. The Tanana Middle School request to fundraise approximately $1,000 by selling popcorn to help with new athletic uniforms. They're accepting Tanana Middle School's request for fundraising approximately $5,000 by hosting a readathon to help with additional books and equipment for the library, and approved University Park Elementary School's request to fundraise approximately $2,700 by online donations through Kids Heart Challenge for the American Heart Association. The board is approving Lathrop High School's request for permission to raise approximately $20,000 to send cadets and chaperones to Honolulu, Hawaii on March 7th through 15th, 2023 to tour and visit military historical sites at no cost to the district. And if any local, state, or federal travel or health warnings are issued, the students will not travel. And approved Randy Smith Middle School's request for permission to raise approximately $5,000 to send 20 students with chaperones to Washington, D.C. and Williamsburg, Virginia on April 15th through the 22nd, 2023 to participate in the Close-Up program and visit historical sites at no cost to the district, and if any local, state, or federal travel or health warnings are issued, the students will not travel. The board is accepting the donation of $1,000 from Worry Free Alaska, LLC, to Lathrop High School to support the school's football team. Accept the donation of $2,250 from Northern Area Aquatics to Lathrop High School to support the school's 2022-2023 swim team, and another donation of $2,250 from the Northern Area Aquatics to Lathrop High School to support the school's 2022-2023 swim team, and accept the donation of $16,386.25 from West Valley Girls Soccer Booster Club to West Valley High School to support the school's 2021-2022 soccer season. The board has approved the personnel action report for the period October 8th through October 21st, 2022, and approved the minutes from the September 20th and October 4th, 2022 regular meetings and the September 19th, October 3rd, October 17th, 2022 special meetings, and the September 19th, 2022 work session as submitted. The board acknowledges the personnel information report for the period October 7th through October 21st, 2022, and acknowledging the board's reading file, and acknowledges the board's coming events and meeting announcements.
Thank you. Public comments on reports and non-agenda items, including public comment, input, ideas, and suggestions are welcome on salary, benefits, and other contractual items regarding the Education Support Association, ESSA, and the Fairbanks Education Association, FEA negotiations. Our core value is engage with students, family, staff, and community to support student success. Public comments on reports and non-agenda items are limited to 2 minutes per person for a maximum of 1 hour. People who have signed up in advance through the school board office to testify in person or by Zoom will be called upon first, and if time remains, anyone who is in person will be invited to testify until the 1 hour time limit has been reached. A person testifying shall state their full name, spelling, their last name, and their city of residence for the record. Board members may ask questions for clarification purposes. So the first person we have to, on the non-agenda items is Ms. Violetta Knight. If you could please come forward and state your name, spell your last name, and your place of residence. You have 2 minutes.
My name is this on? Okay. My name is Violetta Knight, last name Knight, and I've lived in Fairbanks for the past 40 years. Welcome, Mrs. Burnett, and welcome, Mrs. Hardy. I'm sure your mom's proud. Okay, I digress. First, I was here as an active duty Army service member, and that was a long time ago. But now I'm a civilian and a property taxpayer. Tonight, I'm here as a grandparent of 2 students currently enrolled in the district. The school climate survey results discussed at the September 20th board meeting concerned me greatly in reference to the number of African American students who said that they didn't feel comfortable in some of the district schools. And I actually screenshot a slide from the presentation. It said African American student group had the lowest positive rate than all other demographic groups for all 3 domains. I'd like to see the school board take this very seriously by doing practical things to address those comments and feelings expressed by African American students. Dr. Ott actually flagged this in his presentation. And there were some of you guys that asked him questions, and he referred it to administration, and they were going to dig into it, and it's about relationships. Well, I have some practical suggestions because this has been done for 6 years, and not a whole lot has changed. So we need to do more than just talk about it. I say reach out to collaborate with military families to encourage teachers who might be dependents, might be African American teachers, work with groups such as local NAACP to connect with HBCU graduates who might be willing to teach in Fairbanks, even if just for a year. I will be back. So I can't say it all in 2 minutes, but I will come back, and so will my daughter. So
Does the board have any questions for Ms. Knight? Mr. Dorn and then Ms. Matheson?
I'm Snite. Good to see you again. Welcome.
Thank
Uh,
you.
would you mind emailing those suggestions to the school board so that we'd all have those right in front of us too? And
Sure.
that might be helpful thank you for putting out some practical things for us to consider.
Ms. Metzen?
I wanted to know what the rest of the suggestions were, so I was going to ask if we can have those.
Oh, sure, there's only a couple more. I knew I only had 2 minutes. So invite local African-American community members to be guest speakers in classrooms or at professional development sessions. And then, because I know that the budget is tight, but we have a lot of African-American professionals in this community that could be role models. And we really, my daughter never had an African-American teacher, and her daughter is in kindergarten this year. And I would hope that that would change before she graduates. So,
Ms. Knight, thank you for your testimony, and before you leave, thank you for your service, no matter when that was. We appreciate it. Thank you. Next, we have Sandy Ryan.
Good evening. My name is Sandy Ryan, R-Y-A-N, a teacher of mathematics and computer science in Fairbanks for the past 29 years. And currently I serve as the Fairbanks Education Association president. I reside in Fairbanks. First, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your dedication to make our school and our community the very best. It can be a thankless job, and I commend you for your dedication. Running for and holding public office is no picnic. Again, thank you for wishing to make Fairbanks and acting upon it the very best place we can. Unfortunately, as you are keenly aware, it has been over a month since the district team walked away from the bargaining table, claiming they were done and needed external assistance. However, on October 24th, a package of articles were hand-delivered to our chief spokesperson. No dates offered, just a package. Over the course of the next several days, our teams reviewed the contents and waited for some communication as to when we will be back at the table. None has come. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a long and rich history of bargaining in the open. Our members and interested people from the public can observe. We do not exchange proposals behind closed doors. It's simply not our way. I once again find myself asking you to direct your team to bargain in good faith. Our teachers, librarians, counselors, therapists, and psychologists deserve it. Our students and our community deserve it. Please direct your team to come with a proposal that truly represents what is needed to once again attract and retain the very best for Fairbanks. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board? Ms. Smith?
Thank you. I just want to clarify, Ms. Ryan, is your testimony accusing our negotiators of doing something inappropriate? I just was confused by what you're.
I'm sorry if you're confused. It's in our ground rules, and when we first sit down to negotiate, we talk about open bargaining and having it so that our members can attend. Exchanging proposals that are kind of not opened in public, I would not say is accusing folks of doing something necessarily wrong. It's just not our way. It's kind of like taking, like if you come into town and I go down airport, I'm gonna take one way and my husband goes another and it just feels wrong. It's kind of like that.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan. Next, we have Kyle Martin. Will you please state your name, spell your last name, and place of residence, area of residence, sorry.
Kyle Martin, M-A-R-T-I-N, and I live on Fort Wainwright. My name is Kyle Martin. I'm a soldier at Fort Wainwright, Alaska. Y'all already probably know my family's name at this point. You all received an email from my wife about discrimination of our special needs child. Our experience at Arctic Light Elementary has been nothing but pleasant. I'd also like to ask how and why Arctic Light Elementary School thinks it's okay to try to get away with not following my son's IEP, FBA, and his BIP. What is going to get done about this? By them not following these legal binding documents, they are breaking the law. The school and its staff have proven time and time again that they don't care. There has been conversations about my son from the staff and earshot of other parents, and that is how we found out about this. By doing so, this violates my son's rights and my rights as a parent. I'll end it with this. If this is happening to my family, what other family is this happening to in this district? This mistreatment will stop and end with the Martin family. I'm advocating so hard because I don't want this experience to ever happen to another family. Thank you.
Are there any questions from the board? It's a clarifying question, yes. Ms. Matheson?
I don't have that email. It's not in here. I just looked it up.
Mhm.
So, Ms. Richardson, if you can email that to me.
Thank you, Mr. Martin, for your testimony. Next, we have Alexis Palmer.
Hi, my name is Alexis Palmer, Palmer, and I live in Fairbanks. I'm in my 4th year of teaching in this district. I'm also the FEA representative for my building and have attended a number of the bargaining sessions between the district and FEA. I personally have been dismayed at the lack of respect I've felt for the hard work I put in every day for my students. Everywhere in this district, there are teachers who work past contract hours, work on curriculum and units over the summer, spend their own money towards supplies and rewards for our class, and who spend hours worrying about our students and how we can give them the support they need. We are in it for the kids. I know that I care deeply about every single student I have ever had, and I do everything in my power to provide the best for them, and I know that I'm absolutely not alone in this. District bargaining members have come to bargaining sessions with lies such as threatening that class sizes would have to increase to an average of 26 if we don't agree to their terms. By the way, my first year of teaching, I had only 28 cubbies for my students and 30 students. They propose that staff pay an additional $300 a month for our already high deductible healthcare plan. And they won't even come to the table to bargain on non-monetary items such as providing dedicated parking for itinerant teachers. How can you come to school and do your job if you can't park there? It is really disheartening to put in so much work to provide the best and to have administration turn around and do this. I want to see Fairbanks be a thriving community, and a large portion of that is being sure that we have a thriving education system. Teachers cannot provide the best for their students if they are overworked, underpaid, and underappreciated. We used to attract the best teachers from around the state because we had the best salary, retirement, and benefits. Now I could move to Washington State and have 18% lower cost of living and receive the same pay and better benefits. I think our educators deserve more, and even more so, I think the children in our community deserve more. I ask that you and also the public listening to let the district know that you value our community's educators.
Thank you, Ms. Palmer, for your testimony. Are there any questions? Thank you. At this, I have no more people signed up. Is there anyone wishing to testify? Okay. Seeing none, testimony is closed. Thank you. So now what do we do? Oh. Next on the agenda is our Borough Assembly report. And Ms. Tammy Wilson, Borough Assembly member, will provide the Assembly report.
Good evening. I remember this time, Mr. Doran. Sometimes my schedules get away from me. So our report is pretty light, which is kind of unusual for us, but we were sorry to lose Frank Tomaszewski and Matt Cooper at last meeting, but we welcome Barbara Haney and Brett Rodmond. to the assembly. We will organize this next week, and we'll see what that will look like. And one of the most exciting things that are on our agenda coming up, for those who like trails, it will be adopting the updated comprehensive recreational trails plan as an element of the Fairbanks North Star Borough Regional Comprehensive Plan. So you can go onto the website and still look at that and make comment. We want to make sure that we're not going through private property, or there's a better way to be able to go. We did have some good testimony last week on it, but again, it's a plan. And so if there's anything in it you don't like, now's the time to change it. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Ms. Wilson? Thank you, Ms. Wilson, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Next, on the agenda is the president's report. And since I was just seated, I don't have a report for you. Just being honest. I will say this, that since this is the month of November, and we have lots of holidays and special days, my head and my heart is geared toward families that might be in need. And so that's what I'll be working on. So if there's, I know there will be a published list of places that families can either receive food boxes or shared meals or a celebration of meals. So hopefully we can make that available, or have places that we can talk to people and share as our days go. So next, we have our chief school administrative report, including an update on transportation. Ms. Meline.
Thank you, President Sanderson. I'd like to begin my report with our 20-day count. The October 20-day count has closed, and our numbers are sitting right around 12,650 students. That's about 460 above our projected last year, and about 380 above the count from last year. So those numbers are looking pretty solid and positive at this point. We will get an in-depth presentation on transportation from our Durham partners and the school transportation a little later in the meeting, so I won't spend too much time on that. I do just want to say, when it comes to transportation, Durham has been a good partner, and like with every partnership, each of the partners want the other to succeed. So Durham is working really hard for us to find success in our student transportation, and we want to see them succeed in their business as well. So finally, I want to address a couple of our strategic plan items, and one is student success. So I would like to congratulate the West Valley High School tennis team. They participated in the state tournament and in the state tournament awards ceremony, and they were recognized for the academic award at the ASA, the ASAA Tennis Championship Award ceremony. So what this means is that our tennis team that participated in the championship matches had a higher GPA than any other team that participated. So not only are these students performing in the classroom, but they're performing on the court. They brought home two third place awards, medals during this tournament. And just to, I can't overstate what this means, because our tennis team doesn't have an indoor tennis court. All of their practicing has to happen whenever they can be outside here in the interior of Alaska. So they perform on the court and they perform in the classroom, and that's real, honest to goodness student success. So congratulations to the West Valley tennis team. And finally, one of our core values is collaboration and engaging with families and staff in support for student success. And we just completed 2 days of parent-teacher conferences that made that space available to parents and teachers and staff to communicate and support their students towards success. So students will be back in school tomorrow, so watch for those big yellow school buses. They'll be all over town. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. Moline. Mm. Are there any questions from the board? Ms. Marati?
Thank you for your report. I just wanted to confirm that the next board update on negotiations, is that November 14th? Because this is if needed on the calendar.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay,
That will be in the form of an executive session.
great. And then based on the testimony that we heard tonight, can you confirm when the next bargaining session is with FEA?
I don't have that information. Mr. DeGraw, do you have that in front of you?
There are not any official sessions on the calendar at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Hardy?
Yeah. Was there any specific location or age group for our gain in students? Did we see an increase in the BEST program, or do we know any of that from the 20-day count?
What we saw was an increase across the district. Most buildings saw some sort of student count increase. Some buildings saw more than others, but looking back 2 years ago, some experienced more of a loss than others. So it was across the district, and the BEST program has maintained enrollment. They're at about 800, a little over 800 right now, which is actually up from last year. So our homeschool program has maintained their enrollment and seen an increase.
Thank you. Next up, action item is the dorm transportation report. Goals and objectives: communication, engagement, ensure students, staff, families, and community are informed, connected, and engaged with the district. Administration and dorm transportation will report on contract changes to include the use of vans as part of the transportation contract. Vote on the contract changes will be before the board for the appeal at its Tuesday, November 15, 2022 regular meeting.
So as they're getting set up and getting ready to present their report, what we're going to do is there's some things happening in the Durham transportation world that they're going to tell us about first, and then we'll talk about the contract changes and address any questions you might have that you didn't receive already via email. So with that, I'll turn it over to our transportation team and to our partners, Durham.
Thank you, Ms. Moline. We'll start out with just a general report from Will Zimmerman, representative from Durham. We're pleased to have him here with us today. And then after Mr. Zimmerman's report, we will go into some details on the contract amendments that are in the board's packet this evening.
Good evening. Just to give a brief update on staffing, because I know that's the biggest issue to date pretty much everywhere, is happy to report that we've been able to add this school year so far 16 drivers with an outlook in the next 5 to 10 days to add 3 to 6 more drivers, bringing us up to a total driver count of 82. And we've also brought in 22, soon to be 23 drivers from other areas both in Texas and in the Northwest that will be start driving this coming Monday to aid in the driver shortages that we've been seeing throughout the year. We're currently still holding all of our current signing bonuses, having diligent online recruiting. A dedicated recruiter has been, an offer has just been extended to somebody to be a dedicated driver recruiter just for the location here in Fairbanks. So having all that said, I feel very good about where we're headed as far as driver counts, and we really appreciate the partnership thus far. And I think we have a pretty bright future here as far as getting drivers through the door and getting to full service.
So good evening, everyone. It's been 3 years since we brought the contract in front of y'all, and a lot's changed in that time. When we originally brought the contract up, we were on a 3-tiered bus system. We were in the middle of a bell time study at that point, and one of the board's questions during that when we brought the contract up was, would we be able to renegotiate rates at some point if we were able to find efficiencies? Well, so the contract was finalized about a month before anyone had ever heard of COVID. And then that rocked our world, and everyone's. Y'all all lived through it too. But in the tumultuous economic and labor market environment that we found ourselves in afterwards, we find ourselves in a very different environment than we did 3 years ago when the contract was contemplated. We've had to take steps along the way. We've had to find efficiencies. One of those efficiencies was we went with some of the recommendations from that bell time study. We reorganized our schedules, we've condensed routes, and the result of that is we don't need as many routes even when we are fully staffed. We do need more routes, but when we get to full staffing, because of these efficiencies we found, we don't need as many routes now. Durham has also made changes that weren't originally contemplated in this contract, and Will tell you about some of those, but one of those is that they offered drivers a 10% pay increase the first year of the contract. We're still really short. They offered them a 14% pay increase this year. Our drivers are now the best paid in the Big 5 districts by 25% starting out. Durham's definitely been investing in trying to solve this problem too. So what that really leaves us is we're in a very different situation now, in a different environment than we were 3 years ago when we contemplated this contract. So we're trying to, with this amendment, we're trying to bring the contract in line with our current environment, our current needs. So we're going to do that in 2 ways. So this amendment really is the result of that good faith renegotiation that we promised the board 3 years ago, and then with the changing situations, now, well, here we are. So the first item is route count and cost structure. So we're reducing the route count, the total route count of 130 down to 115. With 15 less routes, that's 15 less routes we're going to have to budget for each year. So that's approximately $1.2 million less that the district has to budget for each year. With that, the new full route count will be 115 routes. And then the district will also cover fixed cost for up to 20 routes that are reduced below 115. So not those 15 that we're taking right off the top, but anything below 115 will cover up to 20 routes of fixed cost. The fixed costs are approximately 35% of a special education route daily rate and about 45% approximately of a regular route daily rate. So Durham is still incentivized to staff every possible route they can. This is just helping to cover some of the costs for that bus and the facilities for those routes that aren't staffed and aren't run at that time. So the second part of this amendment is passenger vehicle transportation. And what we're trying to do here is put more tools on the table to get students to school. We're trying to expand our labor force beyond just CDL drivers. So with passenger vehicles, that opens up the pool of available labor to us, to not just those with a CDL. The passenger vehicles will be utilized to supplement our school bus transportation. We're not trying to supplant school buses here. School buses will remain our priority for routing students. What we're talking about is when there is no bus available, or our bus isn't feasible, we've traditionally had to rely on alternative forms of transportation, such as the MAX bus or a taxi or in lieu payments. This is something we could prioritize over a taxi, over putting a student on a MAX bus. So we're still going to prioritize buses first, but this gives us another tool in our toolbox to fill in some of the gaps. They're primarily going to be focused in two areas. Our focus is going to be on our McKinney-Vento, which are our homeless students, and our foster care students. That's required transportation to school of origin under the McKinney-Vento Act and the Every Student Succeeds Act. It frees up some buses because we always try to prioritize putting those students on a bus first. That frees up some space on a route, but it also, like, we can prioritize putting those students in passenger vehicles before we put them in a taxi or an alternative form of transportation. Second area would be some of our low-density areas where we currently have a gap in coverage right now, where I don't have a bus in some of the farther out areas where there aren't as many students. We expect that element of the passenger vehicle transportation to go away as we get more buses and can return bus service into those areas. But we plan on using it to fill the gaps for now. But an enduring aspect of this would be that required transportation. And with that, I'll turn it over to Will.
Does anybody have any questions for?
The lights are green.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions for Durham regarding the difference in transportation for the vehicles, the passenger vehicles versus school buses? Anything like that as far as the safety standards? All the drivers are going to be 100% vetted the way a school bus driver would. They go through all the safety training. The only difference is they would not hold a Class B license for the GVWR for that size of a vehicle or the air brake endorsement. So it widens our pool, but the vehicle itself, the driver itself, are just as safe and just as trained.
Ms. Barnett, you had a question?
I do. I know that there's a lot of concern out there from many parents. First off, thank you so much for, I know it's a crazy world out there. We're all facing a world of difference, whether it's restaurant work or buses or anything. So thank you for your hard work. I know that a lot of our parents, though, have a lot of concern, not just with the vans and the buses, but getting to school on time. Do we have a plan in place to maybe train up our drivers currently, though, especially the new ones that we have, to maybe get these routes more efficient to get our kids to school on time? I mean, getting them there is the first battle. Getting them there on time is a bigger one.
So, yeah, I'll start. So it goes hand in hand with having enough drivers. And you can watch those, I mean, I have graphs that I have in programs that I use, and they're almost, parallel to each other. As you add drivers, that on-time performance increases. That's why we brought the drivers in. That's why we're being so aggressive. The drivers in from out of state, that's why we're being so aggressive with our hiring. It's why we hired a dedicated person just to do recruiting for Fairbanks, is because ultimately that problem gets solved by adding the driver count and kind of making it easier for those drivers to be on time, easier for our dispatchers to make sure that they're there on time. So that's really what we're concentrating on. I'm actually have an exercise tomorrow with my general manager there, where we're going to look at some route departures and make sure that we're efficient in all our yard departure to go on route and that kind of thing, and make sure that we're having the right buses at the right yard to make sure that we're maximizing that on-time performance as well.
Thank you. Mr. Dorn?
Thank you for being here tonight, and want to compliment the entire team. I know we sent you a bunch of questions. You worked hard, sometimes on a 24-hour turnaround, and sent out answers this afternoon. So, but a couple of questions that just came up this evening. Mr. Zimmerman, you mentioned these drivers coming in, and again, really appreciate all the work that Durham is doing to meet a changing labor market to provide their service here.
I appreciate that.
My basic question is, how long will these drivers be here for, in line with, will they be here until we can fill them, or will they be leaving possibly without a lap and then without an overlap, and then we have a gap and maybe reduction in services? If you could address that concern?
Yeah, great question. Actually, the plan, they will cycle out because they live some in Texas, some in Washington, some in Idaho. But the plan, we have enough drivers there to cycle them out and keep the drivers fresh. Now, some drivers, they may choose to stay, and that's perfectly fine with us, obviously, if they want to stay. The plan is obviously to get staff here because it's very costly for us to bring those drivers in from out of town. But we are actually adding drivers at all these locations that they're coming from. We're still adding drivers in those locations. So I don't foresee at this point any issue with cycling those drivers out and keeping those counts where they need to be. It wouldn't make much sense for us to bring them here for 3 weeks and then decrease service again. I mean, we might as well just not do it at that point. So, yeah.
Mr. DeGraw.
Oh, Mr. DeGraw, go ahead.
Yes, just to add to that, the district is committed 100% to adding routes in a deliberate, systematic fashion to where, as Mr. Zimmerman mentioned, we don't want to expand service just to pull it back a couple weeks later. So 100% committed to making sure that we add routes back in a sustainable fashion to where we can maintain that consistently going forward.
I do one more question back in the
Go ahead, Mr. Durham.
Mr. Hinton, you mentioned about the start time discussion. Just confirm for me that even, let's say, in 5 years, we change the start times, the bell times. We can still do that. That's already with fact, whether it was early, let's say a later start for secondary, which was one of our options at the time. It doesn't really matter. We've got enough busing. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. If I be back in the queue.
Ms.
Thank you. Let's see, how many drivers do we need to have in order to not need the van plan and also ensure that all routes are covered?
So I would say that we would still need a passenger vehicle plan because even when we were at 137 routes years ago, we were still putting students in taxis because it's not feasible to transport some students to school of origin because it would take up an entire route. If I'm going from the North Pole area to take a student to Pearl Creek, then it's not feasible to devote an entire bus to that. So, but to not need it to fill in the gaps, I guess, for like the areas on the outside, we would want to be back at closer to, I want to say approximately 95. I'm going to qualify everything with approximately, ma'am. And then, so we would need probably about 115 drivers.
Okay, thank you. I have other questions you want me to ask, or you want me to
Do you
wait?
have a follow-up? Go ahead and do one, another one.
Okay. Let's see. For the 1.2 million reduction in cost, by reducing the routes from 130 to 115, is that something that we're voting on the 15th?
Yes, that's in the contract amendment that's in the packet. Yes.
Okay. And then if we do that, then will those funds come before the board to be reallocated?
So the funds that we're dealing with, Ms. Marotti, are specifically in the transportation fund, so they aren't operating fund dollars. And so those funds typically will stay in the transportation fund. So not necessarily a vote needed on reallocation of those dollars. There'd be transportation funds dedicated from the state to the district for that purpose.
May I follow up?
One more, and then we'll go to another board member.
Thank you. So not typically voted on to reallocate, but are those funds restricted to transportation, or could the board vote to reallocate those funds?
Yes, that's a restricted grant from the state. Now, in years past, just to clarify, years past there has been a subsidies from the general fund. So if we were to run historical routes, there was a deficit, yes, those dollars would be able to be reallocated by the board. But in the situation that we're in now, we've zeroed out that subsidy from the general fund, and so the remaining are restricted dollars.
And that's similar to what happened last year, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Dorn?
You mentioned the McKinney-Vento, and I really like the plan that looking forward with the vans that it gives us versatility. But the McKinney-Vento and others in that area of funding, that would actually help to cover some of that cost? Or does it just get restricted under the state?
So not sure I'm 100% sure of the question, but expenditures made in the area of the van plan will be offset by dollars we're already spending through taxis is the main area. So yes.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And then I had one.
Go ahead, and then I'll put myself in the queue.
It came up in response to one of the questions from another board member today. Could you just clarify how child booster seating would work in a van? Because I know they would have under different rules than the bus, which already has some protections for students. So how does that work for?
I mean, it's just going to be installed in the seat like it would be for a bus seat. There's nothing that would keep any seat that I'm aware of to be attached to a bus seat different than especially for cars. You're talking for car seats specifically?
Right.
They would attach just like they would to a bus. Most car seats have multiple options, whether you tether them over, and I speak to this because I just had to do it yesterday on my own vehicle, is they can either tether to the hooks on the bottom, which these vans come equipped with. They're between the seat and the bottom of the seat, which most people who have kids would recognize what I'm talking about. I don't know if I'm explaining it very well.
No, you're doing a good job, but I don't need. I know how they attach. I guess it's more in terms of just practice. There will be booster seats, for instance, in the back of the van. That if you have a younger child, a 5-year-old riding that van, and you have a 10-year-old, you don't need one for the 10-year-old, but you need one for the 5-year-old. You can just pop that in for that.
There's nothing that would prevent it from going in the van
vehicle.
than it would in a bus. And the drivers that put them on the buses now would be just as qualified to do them in a van. And we would put them through that training if necessary. Well, no, not if necessary. We do put them through that training. Since these will be new drivers coming into us to drive the vans, they would go through that training as part of the regular driver training.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll put myself in the queue, and then Ms. Hardy. So my question concerns the initiative or that the borough did with us for additional monies. Is that part of this budget that you're talking about, these funds?
Yeah, so that is a separate allocation that the borough is making, specifically dollars towards the driver wages, and that'll be dealt with outside of our contract here directly with Durham.
And then my final question is, we still are only doing no schools of choice, just our regular schools for transportation, is that correct?
For the time being, that is correct.
And even if you had the additional 115 drivers, that still doesn't change?
That would change things.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Hardy, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, the first one was just a follow-up because I did ask that car seat question as a mom of young kids. And you kind of, I think, answered it. You said you put them through training, and that's similar to like a car seat technician training. So there's somebody who is, I don't know if you get what I'm getting at. Like,
I do.
Okay.
So they
That's
would receive the
covered.
training, the same training they would do if it was a school bus, just would be on their particular vehicle, their van. They would be qualified to do that, to put any of the car seats in that they need to.
And make sure that it's safe. That's just, it's one of those mom things. With
I get it.
Seats
Yeah.
and all the rest of it. You're trusting. The other one I had, and it came up from another member's question, was the app, and you answered that well. The question kind of follow-up to that one is, do we have a ballpark as to when those Power School and other issues will be, like when you think that app for families will be ready?
It's pretty close to being able to go live right now. I mean, this just came up as a question in the last 12 hours for me, but I can follow up with you with a better time frame, a more accurate time frame for sure.
Yeah, thank you. You guys did a wonderful job asking our questions ahead of time.
Thank you.
Ms. Marati?
Thanks. Let's see. Is the van plan approved by deed or the federal government yet?
So, no, it wouldn't be approved by the federal government, and no, we have not gotten approval from DEED because they're not our governing body. Y'all are.
Mr. Doran?
Okay, the last two things that I have, one, and I don't want to get off on this because it's not directly for the contract, but it came up. The bonus through the borough, have we worked out the details? Because I know there's a deadline on that. So don't go
Specific,
into depth.
which details are you specifically referring to?
The
Mr. Dorn?
logistics that it will be able to be done.
Yes, we've
Straight.
determined, yeah, I've been working with the borough, and we will, yes, that has been
Okay.
settled.
I don't want to
We
get
will-
off track,
yep.
but you answered my.
And you know, officially, we want that to be an incentive for drivers to be at work as often as possible, and so we'll work out specifics with Durham on incentives for that bonus to be able to, you know, encourage presence in the workforce. So, thank you.
Thank you. And then my last question was for Mr. Zimmerman, representing the big picture of Durham. We've still got, what, 7, 8 years for the contract, 7.5 years, I think. Just going ahead as best you can, what's the projections that you see as a company for the next couple of years, several years, for being able to get as we try and get up to our 115 routes to fully?
So it's been quite a war over the last few years, as you can imagine. But you know, in what I'm seeing in the industry wide, it does feel like it feels like at this point that we're turning a corner, which is why we're able to bring these 20 plus in, and I have 10 plus in our Wasilla contract. Some are turning slower than others. Fairbanks is a community that's turning a little bit slower than others, and there's different economic factors for that. But yes, I feel that it is turning a corner, and this industry tends to be cyclic like that, and I think we are on the upswing of the cycle now. So at least I hope for the amount of hours that I'm putting in every day that cycle continues to go up, because I think that's ultimately where we need to be, and there's nothing that really concerns me at this point that we're not going to continue to see that trend. So I'm hopeful, and I'm seeing that, and what I'm seeing just from what we were able to put through the first month of the school year versus the last 2 months of the school year, it seems to be that line is sharply raising. So I think that we're going to be in a good place, and of course we want to be here for longer than 7 or 8 years. So I feel that we'll be successful there.
Well, thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for, the industry perspective. So,
Yeah.
And again, I just want to say thank you to administration and to the transportation team for the quick work at our questions beforehand, and for putting all this together. I think thinking outside the box is really, really appreciated. So with the van piece.
Thank you. Ms. Smith, did you have any questions? All right, thanks. One more question from Ms. Malati.
Could we, through the chair, if that's okay,
Go ahead.
could we be emailed the cost of adding an additional van to this plan for the SMART program in order to provide equitable access to education for the students that are attending SMART?
Yeah, it would just be the daily fee for a van. So there's, I can get the, something. So it would be $462 a day.
Okay. Mr. DeGraw, is this something,
So, annually, that would be $78,000.
or I'm not sure who to go through for this, but is this something that we could consider? It's something that I was talking to the past board chair about, and she said that she would recommend it to the next chair. But I think that we often run into issues in our discipline process when we require them to attend SMART, but they don't have access to get there. So I'm hoping that as a board we can consider that.
Thank you, Ms. Moretti. Thank you for your presentation. Anything else from you? From us? If I could just stay on my screen. That brings us to our board comments. I'll start with Ms. Marati.
No comments.
No comments.
Ms. Smith?
Nothing, thank you.
Ms. Hardy?
I do have one, and I hope it's appropriate. I want to say that I care very deeply as a special educator and a mom of a child in special education, and that special education and the students in it hold a particularly huge piece of my heart. Mr. Martin, please know that your concerns have not fallen on deaf ears. I hear them and I share them, and I encourage you to keep fighting, and you are not alone in this fight. Thank you.
Mr. Dorn?
I just wanted to recognize we have had a couple of elected officials in our audience tonight. I mean, besides Mrs. Wilson, really appreciate your coming. We also had, I saw Senator Cliff Bishop was here, and appreciate John Ringstad, not as elected, well, now you are an elected official for the city, but as our district lobbyist, really appreciate your coming for that. Then the other thing is I'll look forward to the administration as you consider scheduling future bargaining dates that we'll see coming up. I know we'll be getting an update in a couple of weeks on negotiations as well. And that's all my comments tonight. Thank you.
I have no comments. Ms. Moline, did you have anything else?
I have no comments at this time.
I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn?
Second.